Yep.
Okay.
So this is our continuation of back pain idea. And the key thing that we need to get out of this today is we're starting to think a lot about business model, and that's why you see the business model generation layout and it's populated. So we were going through an exercise of what we think the key issues are, and I think our key decision point from a business model perspective is whether to really focus on going consumer or to really push this as a true medical device, or to potentially go with a hybrid solution of pursuing consumer while we also parallel medical. And maybe I'm gonna let Andrew just spend a minute or two kind of talking a little bit about sort of what we've gotten up to speed with from just between what was presented last week to this week. Because last week we presented like a sticker, right? And I think we've gotten a little bit further on that, but maybe you wanna talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so we're taking the next couple of weeks to dig deep into building some actual prototypes, sensor-based prototypes. So the way that I'm thinking about this now is Band-Aid sensors. Essentially, it's going to be like a patch that you put onto your spine, and it will measure the curvature, right, depending on the resistance of the actual material. So there's different types of materials that we can play around with. One of the cool ones is piezoelectric material, right, where when you flex it, it changes resistivity. You can measure that resistivity and you figure out what the curvature is, right? And the cool thing is that this is all about behavior change, right? So the technology also needs to meet the user wherever the user is, right? So what we can do is we can modulate the sensitivity of the sensor, right? So in the very beginning, when you're like really curved, it will be, you know, the tolerance would be wide, right? But and that tolerance will narrow as the user progresses over time, right? Because what we're doing is we're developing a system where we can push the user through baby steps, you know, along this way to better posture, right? And every week when it gets better, like we're going to be tracking it, and there will be some type of, you know, real-time feedback of buzzing and so on and so forth. But that buzzing won't happen, you know, we don't want it to happen too frequently, right? Otherwise it's going to drown out. So we need to be really sensitive. We need to be understanding what's happening with the body, with that person's particular body, throughout the entire progress. So what we can do with that is, through some predictive analytics, modulate the sensitivity of the sensor, right? So it's less sensitive in the very beginning and gets more and more sensitive over time when our posture gets better and better and better. Does that make sense?
So kind of building off of the ideas we talked about last week, which is either a back age kind of an idea or how many times did your back get vibrated, right? Last week it was 50, this week it was 25, you're getting better. Avatar of an old lady or old person becoming sort of more upright as you get better at it. Just fun things, engaging things. But I think also to the point of what Andrew's talking about with the Band-Aid sensor, one of the things we're considering is that literally these sensors are like $1 a pop, or they're so cheap that they almost are giveaways and they're disposable, so that what you end up selling is a service on the other end, right? Like whatever it is, $10 a month. And so then there needs to be content as well. So it's the concept of having the sensor, but really it's about what does the sensor inform you about, and to be basically sell that content on the back end, because we're seeing that we know that the sensors are also going to get super cheap, and so you know we think it's going to get there really fast. So for us, you know, as we've been thinking about this, we've been thinking, okay, well, does that lend itself more to being really a consumer kind of a product? And obviously the con there is that people are really used to not having to pay anything for medical and health stuff, right? We think that the trend going for us there is that as there's more and more high deductible plans, people are becoming more exposed to these pricing of having to pay up front for things, and so that may become less of an issue. The other thing we talked about, we just were talking about a little earlier, was that, you know, if you can actually get this into being able to use your HSA account, for example, to pay for it, then you're basically getting a 30% discount, and so that may be incentive enough. And if the price point is low enough that, let's say it's like a $10 a month, $20 a month kind of a thing, you know, that may not feel that painful coming out of an HSA account, for example. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the other thing that we thought about, so we've been trying to learn from Zeo, because we think Zeo has struggled because they're a consumer they're a consumer company, so we worry about that. But maybe it's different because they're selling hardware, and we may not actually be really selling hardware. It might be more, if we can get the sensors cheap enough that...
What is Zeo, by the way?
Zeo is a sleep, it's a band that you wear on your head that basically tracks your sleep. And what they do, so they started out as a $399, selling for $399, all inclusive, including like different services and whatnot. People didn't want to buy it, and they sold it. So then they started selling it for $199 with like trying to upsell services, and now they just sell for $199 everything all in. So we kind of see this issue of if you're a hardware company, you know, you just keep getting undercut, and then there's things like Lark and other things that are also starting to track your sleep, which, you know, I think it just starts to feel like it becomes tough. And so, you know, when we were looking at that, we sort of started to think about, well, you know, they had a choice in the beginning of whether to go medical or to go consumer, and they chose to go consumer because that's where their passion was, that was their rationale. My thinking for Zeo would have been, well, if you could really, say, solve a sleep apnea problem or really be able to detect that, sleep labs are like $3,000 a night, or they're really expensive, whatever they are. So if you were able to actually get approved for that, you could, instead of going to a sleep lab, you could just rent a Zeo for like a week, right, or whatever, and then charge, say, like $1,500 or $2,000, get that information back, and then essentially, you know, like that might have been a better way for them to go. So that's where our struggle is. We're trying to figure out, okay, we think we're going to solve a real medical problem here. It may be right on the border of a wellness to a real medical problem, so maybe that would push us to consumer, but we want to sort of start to tease apart if we're able to actually make this concept work. Whether we would be sort of laser focused in being a consumer company, or laser focused trying to become a medical company, or to maybe have a hybrid approach. So that's kind of our dilemma that we're struggling with right now. And so I didn't go through all this, but basically we went through this exercise to try to, you know, tease that apart.
So what does your gut tell you right now? Like, if you had to make a decision right now, which way would you go?
Well, since we just had a meeting.
With the VC that told us to go consumer.
Yeah.
To go consumer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Yeah.
Well, he's really, I mean, I think is, he's been through the battle scars of being at a molecular diagnostics company, a sister company to the one I worked with called XDX. And it is really challenging to go the regulatory route, and it takes a long time. So, you know, it's probably a year or 2 years. And he questions whether the market is really bigger in the medical side versus on the consumer side, especially in our case where if we're not really selling hardware, if really we're able to create sensors that are that cheap and that they're going to be commoditized and really we're selling content, that might become a compelling reason to actually try to go consumer, given the trend that consumers are probably going to be more exposed to paying for medical stuff, and they're used to paying for wellness stuff. And plus there's another marketing angle to our product, which is that when your posture gets better and you learn how to lengthen your spine, you actually might grow a little bit. So people say that you might actually gain another ½ an inch by having better posture and stretching your spine out or more. And so because of that, you could imagine marketing that. You could imagine selling that like P90X style.
Yeah.
You could, I mean,
It's
you
like
could,
gymnasts, or like what's the low-hanging fruit customer segment who's, you know,
besides people
itching?
who are in pain. I
Yeah.
think people who want more confidence by being able to stand appropriately and have more posture. You know, people who, yeah, I mean.
Do you think there's a more specific niche, like
I think the
something
low-hanging
that's
fruit is the wealthy who go to these wellness centers. I really think the Whole Foods market.
But I think it's people that do struggle with having back pain who are willing to actually pay and are thinking about alternative therapies and actually go to those types of places and have the money to spend on it.
Claire?
So on that wealthy segment that can actually pay for sort of in-person service and advice if they wanted to, is the premise that this would work better than that? So if I have unlimited income to deploy, or a lot of income to deploy towards a very pressing problem, why isn't that already getting solved by services in the marketplace? Would this be better, or?
It would be better in that you don't have to go somewhere, you know, because for a lot of the wealthiest, for everyone, time is an issue and convenience is an issue. And so this is a way of getting that to them. And one thing I would just modify a little bit to what Charles said, I don't think this would just be a content play, this would also be analysis play, right? Like, so we're actually taking signals from the sensors to provide you deep analysis about your posture and your behavior. So I think that would be a differentiator as well.
The curvature of your back, the quote-unquote age of your back, and how well you're progressing, right?
I think in an ideal setting, you'd actually you'd start in a wellness center, they'd kind of show you some stuff, and then this would be a way to make sure that when you're at home, you're actually doing it.
Like maintenance.
And then you don't have to go in as many times, but you probably still go once or twice just to kind of get oriented.
Just to build on that, sorry, and actually that could be one of our go-to-market strategies as well, is to use these wellness centers as a distribution channel, physical therapists, and to make our approach non-denominational enough, because I know there's like this fight between physical therapists and yoga people and and to just find that common ground of, what's a technique or approach that they could all, say, hey, this is a great thing for you to reinforce learn, what we're already teaching you. We think that could be a good initial strategy. Use them as a sales channel.
I have two questions. One is, does it make sense to grow to the FDA route? Like, can you start consumer and then?
Yeah, that was our thought, basically. Well, I think our first thought was, we grow consumer, that allows us to be able to rapidly prototype whatever it is, because once you start going down FDA, you kind of have to have something set, and you can't really change it because you're basically testing it in a trial fashion to get FDA cleared. So that's challenging. So one of the initial thoughts we had was, let's go down the consumer route. We can continue to perfect it, and once we get to a point where we think that the product is really good, then we would sort of parallel that track and go down the regulated route. The issue is that, I think one of the cons about that is that your organization becomes sort of split in a way. Like, you have to build a clinical organization in that respect, and that sometimes doesn't jive with facing a consumer product company, which feels very different on the inside when you live in one. So you're almost mixing two cultures that might be interesting.
That is as well as this product design. If we think this is going to be a consumer play, the way we design it, that's going to hang at Walgreens, then the way we design the product is very different from if we eventually know that it's going to go into the medical markets, then we're going to design the product differently. So as much as I want to hedge our bets on both, I think we need to pick one.
I feel like I'm going to give the same feedback that as the other one, but I really see a market in the enterprise space, right? They spend so much money on workers' comp, right? And wrist is a big part of it, lower back pain is a big part of it. So I remember, like, at eBay, we had tons of engineers, right? A big percentage getting injured. And then there was this lady, one ergonomic consultant, I don't know how much she was paid, but she must be expensive, and you have to make an appointment with her. She shows up 21 days later, right? Like, I know how it changed since 2008, but I guess my point is, you can very well sell to companies, tons of them actually, and the ergonomic consultant just distributes and looks at the data and helps them adjust their posture or something. I really see a big business model there instead of consumer.
We think we can do consumer and employers with the same channel. I think medical becomes different.
Medical is different.
And we could also go, if we don't think we can get to employers, we could also potentially go through wellness programs and solutions that sort of bundle this in, and essentially they already have the channels to the employers. I think they would undercut us. It would be better for us to be able to go direct to the employer if we can establish those relationships. But I think all those three we could do at the same time. I think the medical channel becomes a little more challenging. We could educate the medical sort of system, because we went to another wellness center yesterday. We went to see Esther Gokhale, and she basically said there's a lot of doctors at PAMF who actually do recommend their patients go to
Esther,
her.
yeah. I see her posters all the time when we go to PAMF hang out there.
So we could, so if we educate the medical community and get them to believe that there is actual true impact in terms of back pain, that they could just, say, you should just try this product because this really might make you feel better. yes, I'm sorry it's out of pocket, but it's not that expensive, you should give it a try.
And another consumer market that we talked about is pregnant women. There's a big percentage of pregnant